Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to our channel and thanks for logging on. Today, both of these contenders take the bronze medal, but which will walk away with gold? See what I did there? It's Bronzo versus Bronzo today on Versus. Alright, let's get started with the challenger because you know the PAM 382. It's a living legend. Let's talk about what IWC hath wrought. Alright, this is a timepiece launched late in 2017 called the Iwc Big Pilots Watch Heritage Bronze, reference 5010-05. A watch that is large and in charge like the Panerai, truly oversized. 46 millimeters in diameter and thick at 15.6 millimeters, but not quite as thick as the Panerai. Because it is so broad from lug to lug at 56.3 millimeters, it actually appears to be a fairly flat watch when it's on the wrist. That said, with a 56 plus span lug to lug, this is a watch for, at minimum, a wrist of 16 centimeters circumference, which is my wrist size. You get a really good sense of this watch's stance, as well as the understanding that oversized is the look here. It's not supposed to appear proportional. I wouldn't go with a smaller wrist than mine because you can see I already have a little bit of lug overlap. The watch has a broad stance between the lugs, just not as broad as the Panerai. 22 millimeters is the size of the strap you'll fit. The timepiece features a remarkably elaborate strap, which is held together by bronze bolts, laced with a little bit of a simulated patina ecru or off-white stitch, very thick and substantial. You can see the layers of construction. It's cav on both sides, and you can see this is in excellent condition, made in France, probably by Camille Fournet. One element that I appreciate from IWC is that they went the extra mile and equipped a bronze buckle. That is not overlooked at this price point. Every detail is appreciated. Now jumping into the case itself, it's very similar to the standard IWC Big Pilots watch, with the main difference here being the fact that the case isn't satin finished, rather it's a light polish which fades a bit over time as the patina or oxidation of the surface of the bronze begins to take hold. Some surfaces have grown almost to a matte finish, although they all started with a bright shine. You can see this one is aging gracefully. The first of these launched in late 2017. You get a sense that this is one to patina but not corrode. The crown is oversized and, as you can see, deeply fluted, faceted, and knurled for easy grip. The dial has a matte finish, and as you can see, blued hands, rich blued hands on a matte base. It has a little bit of a tobacco tone, somewhere between brown and gray. Everything on the dial is designed to match the tone of the case, and I'm okay with it on that basis. I don't love faux tina, but you can see it's not universal in that treatment, as the date wheel itself features a standard white on black print. So it looks good. It's color coordinated with the case, and on that basis, I can embrace it. There's a sunken sub-register for the power reserve. The case back itself is in titanium. As you can see, this was a 1,500-piece limited edition. Not a boutique exclusive, although generally sold out of boutiques. It was a special piece. The titanium is hypoallergenic and resistant to corrosion, so you won't wind up with green patina on your wrist. Underneath the caseback, IWC manufactured caliber 52110, 31 joules, automatic winding, 7-day power reserve. It uses a ceramic Paul Peloton winding system that is both exceptionally clean, it doesn't create dirt on the movement, and exceptionally efficient, winding in both directions. The Peloton is an IWC original. You have that 7-day reserve, but now it's provided by two mainspring barrels. Unlike the original 5000 and 50,000 series watches, this one keeps very good time. It's isochronous and precise. From maximum wind to minimum wind, the old versions of this caliber would run very fast when fully wound, and then very slowly as they approached the end of the line. Stop seconds with a quick set date. The watch also features 5-position adjustment like a chronometer, and an overcoil hairspring on a free-sprung balance, refinements that are much appreciated on a watch that is first and foremost about size and character. It's also a very precise and impressively engineered piece. Screw-down crown. The watch also has a soft iron inner cage like a Milgauss, so the 60-meter water resistance with the screw down is just swimmable, but with the soft iron inner cage, it helps to resist the high-powered magnets that we now find throughout our lives. Everything from the closures of refrigerators, purses, and wallets to high-powered wiring looms, speakers, and woofers. This is a timepiece that is built for daily use, even if the appearance is of nostalgic mid-century modern aviation. Jumping over to IWC's great bronze rival. This was actually the first in our series. The only reason the IWC is on the table today is because of the watch I hold in my hand. Now, back in 2011, Panerai, which calls itself a laboratory of ideas, and I guess you can take that in an abstract sense as a truth, it's more of a styling house than anything else. The bottom line is that this is high style. This is state-of-the-art in design, and back in 2011, there was nothing else like this. The bronze watch trend and the wave of bronze watches, everything from $100 Timex up to $250,000 Fernand Berthoud chronometers, stem from this one model. This is Patient Zero, 47 millimeters in bronze. It's a big watch, 17.4 millimeters thick. It is noticeably thicker on the wrist than the IWC. Let's zoom out a little bit so you can see the watch in proportion. Like the IWC, the look here is supposed to be oversized. It's supposed to dwarf your wrist unless you are truly huge. Now the watch lug-to-lug is also very similar. It's half a millimeter larger, 56.8 millimeters. The spacing is broader though, the 26 millimeter being standard for these 47 millimeter Luminor Submersibles. So that means it's both broader on the wrist and more proportional perhaps in its stance, but also you're going to have a universe of Panerai aftermarket and OEM strap replacement options. You can see the strap itself is a rusticated, rough cut, layered construction calfskin, and it almost feels a little bit flaky on its surface. It is very raw, desiccated, and as you can see, rusticated on its cut flanks. This is not a finished product. It's designed to feel like something hewn from the raw, and it does achieve that impression. Now here's where I wish Panerai had gone the extra mile. This is where IWC gives you a bronze buckle, Panerai gives you titanium. Yes, it's the material on the case back, but I would have preferred to see bronze here. The strap, however, is fixed to the case the right way. As you can see, Panerai used its traditional lug screws to fix the straps. This is a very secure system. No spring bars here, and you can use your strap tools to take off the strap and start swapping. Panerai didn't create a pilot's watch, but a diver's watch, whereas the Big Pilot is designed to evoke the original BR issued to the Luftwaffe in 1940. This design was revived in 2002. The Panerai is designed to echo very loosely a few rotating bezel prototypes built by Panerai during the 1950s and the 1980s, but for the most part, this is a Luminor 1950 case, which is a bit more elaborate than the squared off and stocky Betterini case that we knew during the 90s. And it's also a 47 millimeter case, so larger than the standard Panerai Luminor. With the rotating bezel and the 300 meter water resistance, it's a true ISO 6425 dive watch, the first of the modern diving Panerais, launched with the PAM 25 in 98, and this continues in that tradition. The bezel is rock solid. Listen to this. It sounds as good as it feels. The detent is excellent, and it's substantial. It's a wonderful sort of analog chronograph that you can line up with the bezel and then trace a 60-minute arc, a wonderful way to time things. The dial here is olive drab. Yes, it echoes Panerai's military traditions, but I think more than anything, what it really does is preview the patina and the borderline corrosion of the case as the bronze itself ages. It's designed to be complementary to that green tone that will form around the dial. All of the applique are rose gold. As you can see, rose gold hands, skeletonized. You've got a sunken sub-register, and here you have a date at 3 o'clock. You also have that iconic device protecting the crown. This is a much more secure crown against abrasion and shearing than you'll find on the IWC. This one also features a locking lever. Very difficult to take the plunge and accidentally swim with this locking lever up. It's hard to miss, and it's an easier watch to manipulate with wet, sweaty, or gloved hands. Even as big as the IWC's crown is, this one's completely unlocked for setting and winding once you raise the lever. Now, this is a unique and patented Panerai innovation, but one feature you can't discern simply from the front is that this watch also uses a time zone feature, so caliber 9000 allowing you to jump the date back and forth and move the hours independently, even as the watch continues to tick and keep time. A wonderful feature for world wanderers, so once the dive is done, you can complete your journey back from French Polynesia, regardless of which direction you cross the international date line. Turn it all over, Panerai allows you to see that for which you've paid. This watch, a 1,000 piece limited series from the 2011 model year. You can see the movement, Panerai manufacturer caliber 9000, twin mainspring barrels, 3-day power reserve, 28.8 beat rate. Appreciate the fact that it uses a black polished free sprung index. You can see the cap to the regulator, all of bright polished, combination of blued and polished screws. There's a satin brushed grain across the barrel bridge, which is also cut in a 3/4 style to evoke the old pocket watch movements from Angelus and Rolex Codebert that would have been used in the original military Panerai. Bidirectional rotating, it uses ceramic rotor bearings, and as you saw, the watch features both stop seconds and that time zone function, so you do have an array of features allowing you to set the time precisely. So let's run down the advantages of these two watches. Jumping to the Challenger. Okay, the Iwc Big Pilot, your first and last stop. If you're looking for a pilot style watch, this is the only one in the test. If you're more of a flyer than a diver, or you identify with the romance of the air, stop right here. This is your watch, and drawn from true history. The bronze might be trendy, but the Big Pilot was a bold take on the oversized watch and a reference to IWC's real history back when this core model debuted in 2002. This is IWC heritage to the max, and if you want an iconic IWC, one of the core models of the brand, you're going to get yourself a Mark series, a Portuguese, or this, full stop. Let's talk about slimmer, and by far, almost 2 millimeters. This watch, 15.6 versus 17.4 for the Bronzo. The Bronzo is incredibly chunky, and you can see just how much thicker it is when you go sapphire to sapphire. It is awkward, whereas the Big Pilot has a little bit more of an elegance to it, and certainly a more elegant aspect ratio as it appears far flatter. Also important to note, on many movement engineering terms, this is simply the preferable watch. Let's talk about power reserve, 7 days versus 3 days. Let's talk about the winding system, a ceramic pawl-based bidirectional system, iconic of IWC and far more unique as well as more shock resistant. Let's talk about the power reserve. You have a power reserve indicator on the dial, so you can actually trace that extended power reserve. The Panerai, you don't really know when its 3 days is going to run out. I'll also mention that this watch is adjusted in 5 positions and features an overcoil hairspring. Those are 2 refinements the Panerai cannot match. Also important to note, this is a watch that sells new for $13,200 and pre-owned for about $11,500. The Panerai, now only available pre-owned, sells for $30,000 on pre-owned secondary market exchanges. Let's talk about nighttime vision. The lume on this watch, better. Simply glows better, it's easier to read. Daytime, a more legible watch. So if you plan to watch your watch, this is the obvious choice. Let's talk about corrosion. Well, the unfortunate thing is the Panerai was designed to corrode very quickly and dramatically, and I have seen some gnarly Bronzos. This one's not quite there, but you see what the future might hold if you don't get wise with the vinegar. Now, jumping back to the IWC, you can see that it ages. It doesn't look like high-polished gold, but at the same time, you don't have any actual material that will wipe off on your cuff or your wrist. So on that terms, I think you could say advantage IWC. I would also mention that in terms of rarity, it's true, there are only 1,000 PAM 382s and 1,500 of these, but Panerai keeps iterating the Bronzo, and so far, this is a series of 1,500 and then full stop. Now, let's talk about what the Panerai has. I mentioned there are some terms on which the IWC has the advantage. Let's remember that this watch is true greatness incarnate. This is the watch, the single reference from which you can trace every modern bronze timepiece back to its origin. This was patient zero. This is the watch that started a decade-long design trend, and the first was the best. This is not a wannabe watch. This is not a follow-up, a catch-up, or a Me Too watch. This is a timepiece that truly broke the mold and plowed an all-new furrow. A revolutionary timepiece and the only choice if you want the most important design of the 2010s. Let's talk about the timepieces ruggedness. Okay, first of all, you have 300 meter water resistance versus 60. That's obvious. Let's also talk about a strap that's fixed to the case with screws, no spring bars, far less opportunity for expensive accidents. And then you've got that crown guard that can take a serious knock. And if you absolutely deform the guard, it's held on with screws, it's modular, it can be replaced during service. So this is just a tougher watch. On top of all else, it has a much thicker sapphire that's tougher to fracture or shatter. Let's talk about the dive bezel's utility. I love a dive bezel. It's better than a chronograph, easier to read. A dive bezel always goes to 60, whereas a chronograph generally only goes up to 30 minutes. And then you don't have the downstream maintenance costs of servicing a chronograph. I love the dive bezel, even if I never dive. I used to use dive bezels for timing the interval remaining before the end of a test. And frankly, if you bill hours, if you cook, if you have kids who sit in timeout, dive bezels are great for timing. Also important to mention, a display case back. This is not an artisanally finished movement, neither one of them is, but I should mention that it is a good looking movement and it's fun to be able to see as well as show your friends. Let's talk about the time zone function. The ability to step that hour hand independently, that's solid gold when you're traveling. It's also key if you want to quickly calculate the time in a friend's time zone so you know when not to call in the middle of the night. Let's talk about investment potential. This is a watch that sold for $10,200 new and now trades for almost 3 times that pre-owned. I don't believe it will ever be worth less than it is now, and over time, if you're willing to hold for 5, 10, 15 years, this is a fun way to own a watch while also watching its value rise. And I rarely call out a watch as an investment. When I say it, I mean it seriously. Rarity, again, 1,000 of these versus 1,500 of the other. As a model, not counting the other Bronzos, this is less common, and the market treats it that way. The market treats this as the true Bronzo in value terms. I'll also mention that you have a world of strap options. Objectively, you're just going to have more strap options, OEM and aftermarket, when you own a standard-sized Panerai. And I'm also going to say that this is the one for me. Of the two, it's the one I'd rather own. I appreciate originality, inspiration, and invention. As a creative artist myself, I identify with that, and this watch is special on those terms. I'll also mention that the dial color works well with the tone of the bronze. I actually think it's incredibly attractive, and just as influential as the bronze case, I believe the green dial of this watch was an early volley in the green dial wars that are now coming to a head in 2019. I also think the design genius speaks for itself. I appreciate the utility of the diving bezel, as well as the historic nature of the Bronzo within our decade. This is the one I would take. Even if it doesn't quite fit my wrist as well, I would easily accommodate a few extra millimeters in the form of the original. You guys let me know which of these Bronzos is worthy of your gold medal. Lume, as promised. The Panerai is brighter and it has a lumed seconds hand, but it's a bit easier to read the IWC as the dial is fully lumed, all indices and numerals. You guys let me know which one of these gets your nod.